Welcome to ACMP's January Members Only webinar. We are pleased to start 2014 with Luke Gallopin representing Social Architecture, the Path and the Pains for Us as Organizational Change Practitioners. Before we start, I'd like to take a moment to share an exciting foundational milestone for ACMP. This past Tuesday, January 14th, ACMP members received an email invitation to review the Standard for Change Management draft. Over the next several weeks, ACMP will purposely be asking the change management community to review and provide comment to this important piece of work. Each comment received will be reviewed and responded to by the Standards Working Group. As a member, your email invitation contained a unique link to the Standards Review tool. Your participation is important, so please take a moment if you have not done so already to access the Standard Review tool and provide your thoughts and feedback. For those of you who have already provided your feedback, we thank you. You can continue to help us by forwarding the link to the Standard Review tool to your colleagues, professional networks, and change management practitioner communities. The link that you would forward is located on the final page of the Standards Review tool or located on the Standards Project page of acmpglobal.org. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker, Luke Gallopin, a Belgian-based organizational change practitioner. In 2008, he founded the LinkedIn group Organizational Change Practitioners. Luke Gallopin's approach to organizations is to view them as communities to develop, not as machines to fix. He is the co-author of the SAP Press book, Managing Organizational Change During SAP Implementations. Please welcome Luke Gallopin.
Hello everybody, I'm Luc. I'm in Belgium right now. I am a Belgium-based management consultant, and as we are transitioning the screens right now, I'll just take a brief moment just to boast about the fact that I'm from Belgium. In 2007, as I was introduced already, we did the book on managing organizational change during SAP implementations. Now it is 2014, and I'm diving right into social architecture. Next to that, there are other projects. Together with my wife, I'm starting up a chocolate company, and that's going to be an exciting year. But for the rest, for my serious stuff, I'm diving right into social architecture. Now, just to get a little view on who is in the room, what we are going to do right now is to launch our first poll question. What you're seeing on the screen, and it will be transitioning in just a moment, are all those logos of different social networks. So instead of asking you what age group you are from, or what sector you are from, or what kind of organization you're from, what I am interested in is to know what kind of social background you have. And I'm interested in the social networking background. So the poll question sounds like this. What is your literacy rate on social media? And you can answer that in terms of, I have an account on. Either you have no account on anything, either you, and that's the second option you have, you're more a passive networker, you are on social networks rather a lurker, not sharing. At best you're liking some things, or you're dedicated on some limited platforms, or the last option is that you, what I would say, you're a social media rock star. You are present on just any social media network, and you share, and you are kind of a linchpin. So I will wait a few seconds before Annette joins back in with the results of the poll, and then we have a better sense of who is in the digital room here. And before we started this presentation, I was asking Annette, should I play music or sing a song while we are waiting for the answers? But we agreed not to do it.
Hi there, Luke. I apologize for the lull. I had to edit that poll question before we launched it, but we have answers coming through now, and people are answering quite quickly. So I'm going to share the results in just a couple seconds.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, we have almost 100% of our audience has voted. So I'm going to close the poll now and share the results. The results were people who had none was only 3%. I have a few accounts which are mainly likes, 42%, and then I am on several platforms, one with 54%.
It's perfect. Well, if you would do this exercise with just a raise of hands in a room together, this is about the proportionality that we would get. If we would have done this poll few years ago, there would be quite a different proportionality. So what we are seeing in society is what is represented in this digital classroom or in this digital auditorium. That is that people are slowly but surely getting acquainted with social media networks. Some of us are not, and I am making no judgments about what is good or what is not. I'm just observing that the way our group here digitally is composed already has some acquaintance with that new language of social media. And I will be talking throughout the presentation about that new language of social media. But first, I have another question to ask. It is not going to be a poll question, just something you can ask for yourself. Do you know how monkeys open a banana? And I'm pretty sure that some of you already saw this YouTube film in which it's just a 3-minute video in which a person just explains that he was completely surprised when he went to the zoo and he just watched monkeys opening a banana. Normally what we would do is just pulling from the stem and then switching it and then pulling it and until the inside of the banana gets squeezed and it does not taste anymore. What you have to do in order to open a banana, and that's what we learned from monkeys, is you turn it around, and from the under part, which is still shown on this slide, you just gently squeeze the under part and it peels open automatically. Now you may ask yourself, first of all, why is he saying this? And secondly, why does this matter to this presentation? Well, it matters a lot because what I will be asking you is to look at your current organization, at that banana, so to speak, and just turn it upside down. Because what we will be talking about during this presentation is something that is already there. The only thing that it requires from us, if we want to discover what social architecture is, we should look through different lenses. And that's why the title of this slide is called a paradigm shift and nothing else. The thing is that everything we need in order to start social architecture, and I'm going to explain in a minute what social architecture is already there. In order to get to the explanation of social architecture, there is some research. I had to include some research. I mean, there are a lot of polls going around. McKinsey is one of the most popular. There are also all the consulting companies doing those polls. One that one that I remember from last year was the Edelman research, in which they discovered a gap in trust in institution versus trust in leadership. And what is shown on that slide is on the left-hand side the trust in business, on the right-hand side the trust in government. And they noted that there is a big, enormous gap between the trust we have in businesses and the trust we have in business leaders to tell the truth. And they call it a leadership crisis. And I think they are right to call it a leadership crisis. And what is more surprising is that they come to the conclusion that what is needed right now in order to counter this leadership crisis is a new balance between top-down management and bottom-up listening. And if you would be now in a physical classroom, I would now walk right up to the whiteboard and I would write 2 words on the whiteboard, and that is influence and authority, because those are the two dynamics that are competing right here. What we are seeing here evidenced by the research of Edelman on the trust barometer, is that there is an ongoing conflict between authority, something that we are familiar with through normal hierarchy, and influence, something that is really emerging and it is coming very obvious from the dynamics we see in social networks.
Hi, Luke.
So
This is Annette.
we
I
will be needing.
apologize for the interruption. I've had a few requests that you speak a little bit louder.
Okay, let's see that I can turn my volume up. Or what I will do is I will keep my microphone a little bit closer to my mouth. And I would like to request that if it is still not loud enough, that these people continue to give feedback on the level of the sound. So, if at all I would be speaking too fast or too slow, you're welcome to interrupt me again. Okay?
Certainly, and we've already gotten a lot of comments
Good.
that that's much better. Thank you, Luke.
Okay, thank you very much. I will keep the microphone at this level then. So what we are seeing here in this trust barometer is something that I will come back to, and that's essential in order to understand social architecture, which is two dynamics and two words that I hope you are jotting down right now, and that is influence versus authority. Now, what this means is that 120 years ago, and I'm from Belgium, so I speak in terms of Belgian industrial development. 120 years ago, the first train was riding between the tiny town of Mechelen and the tiny town of Leuven. And we did not know at that time, I certainly not because I wasn't born, we did not know at that time that that was going to be the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution took place, most of it took place in the UK. But what was created there was a model of productivity where the levels, where the laws of gravity were a little bit like on this painting, where co-creation or a family or a community style of creating stuff was not productive, and the straight line to productivity was one of compliance. That is when we started to produce things in big volumes, in batches, and where compliance was the norm for productivity. That is already 120 years ago, and that is how we organized, and that is how we created organizations. And now 120 years later, we are discovering that we are in the digital economy, and that there are different laws of gravity that are applying in a digital economy. Look at how the laws of gravity have switched in the digital economy, and I'm simplifying these things through my paintings here, but co-creation all of a sudden means leverage in this new economy, and compliance all of a sudden leads to learned helplessness. Now, I'm sure that all of you have your personal examples and have witnessed already situations in which it becomes very clear that the outside world is changing at such an enormous pace that a top-down organization where all the information needs to be processed from the top and then digested and then drilled down for instructions to the lower parts of an organization, that is way too slow and that is not working anymore. And we have also witnessed that on other occasions that co-creation and a level of trust and a community kind of building up things is already working and is already in place. If we look at all the startups and everything that has come out from the digital economy, we talk about co-creation, we talk about other specific topics in order to point out that digital economy is already reality. Now, on to the theory about how did it come that we got here is I'm using this painting or this this drawing from Dr. Seuss' book. Whenever I do this presentation in Europe, people do not understand this image, but when I show this for an American audience, they quickly understand it because this is something you know from the Dr. Seuss books from your youth. So I've taken this from the The Places You'll Go book. And what I've shown on this graph is on the vertical axis, the levels of literacy, and on the horizontal axis, the evolution of mankind. I'm making small leaps in here, and I hope you understand the scientific background of this, which is none. It's my intuition that speaks here. When we look at different levels of literacy as apes, and then I'm talking 200,000 years ago, we started making noises, and then slowly speech emerged, which was transformed into a next level of literacy. Those were the cave paintings. And then all of a sudden, when we take a leap in history, we learn to read and write, and that's text. And then when I take another big leap in history, and then I'm already talking about my grandparents here in Belgium, when the first television sets were being created here, it was a whole community, a whole town that was gathering in front of a black and white TV. I have difficulties explaining that to my 11-year-old and my 7-year-old, that in this town, people were gathering with 60, 70 people around a black and white TV set. That was the first evidence of moving image, but people needed to get acquainted to that level of literacy. And then I'm talking about 10, 15 years ago, when I was still in college, we were confronted all of a sudden with something that was called the internet, which meant that our previous levels of literacy, speech, text, image, moving image, did not disappear, but on top of those levels of literacy, we received just a new way of literacy, or a new language of literacy, which was literacy of navigation. I still remember the first time I saw the internet. It was a time when the internet still made a sound, you know, that I could not get my head around what this thing was. Pages, connected pages, and you could click through, and there were other pages, just to get a grasp of it, just to put that in my consciousness. It took me some time. I was getting acquainted to a new literacy. Now, what is the point I'm trying to make here? My contention here is that we are in the middle of creating or applying yet a new layer of literacy on top of that layer of literacy of navigation that we are already possessing, and that is the literacy of collaboration. And that literacy, that new language that we are unconsciously learning, is something that gets under our skin just simply through using social media. I mean, there are only very few courses or books to find on social media or instructions. I mean, you just learn it by looking, you just learn it by talking about it to people and by doing it. So you don't have to go to college to learn it. Slowly but surely, we're getting acquainted to a new literacy. So I'm talking about layered literacy, and that is how I see society evolving. Now, that is one thing. We are talking about something that the famous New York University professor has been referring to as social media is the best tool for group communication since the table. I love that quote, and if I would be in front of the whiteboard, I would write down on the whiteboard, so I will repeat it so you can note it down. Social media is the best tool for group communication since the table. And the person who said it was Clay Shirky. Definitely a name you should Google. Now, what we are seeing here as well is that with this model of layered literacy, or this theory of layered literacy, is that our tribal nature is kicking back in. We will be coming back to the tribal nature. But first, in order to keep you active and awake, what we will be doing next is a poll question, but I first have to explain what this learning pyramid is, and then I will pop up a question that you will be capable of answering through the poll. So what we see here is something that people in organization development and certainly in organizational change have already in some form or another been confronted with. This is the learning pyramid. Now, I'm skating on thin ice here because this learning pyramid, I meet it in every textbook that I see, but I never see a source for it. So if any of the participants knows the scientific source of this learning pyramid that we can encounter almost everywhere, you're welcome to share it. I'm eager to put it on my next presentation and then give you the credits for it. So what we see here is that the logic we see here is that we remember X percentage of what we read We remember 10% of what we read, we remember 20% of what we hear, 30% of what we see, 50% of what we hear and see, and so on. And completely at the bottom of this learning pyramid is the statement we remember about 90% of whatever we have already explained and shown. So in a certain sense, as I'm explaining and showing this here to you, I will be, according to this theory, learning the most out of this presentation. Now let's see how this goes for you. The question I'm asking here is to think about a time in your life where you really learned something that made a difference for the rest of your life. It may be a professional event. It may even go back very far into your childhood. Something that made a paradigm shift in your life. Thinking about, for example, learning to drive the car, learning to drive a bike, learning to swim, or something else that really made a difference in your life. I want you to reflect on it. Select just one learning event and one learning kick, because the title of this slide is the positioning kick. And this is the time where we will switch on the poll question, as I will be reading it out loud for you. The poll question is, where would you position your learning kick? Would it be in the upper part? And remember, the upper part is reading, hearing, or seeing. Was that the way that you learned about this life-changing event? Or were you rather did it rather come to you through hearing it and seeing it and discussing with others? Or that's the middle part, or through the lower part of the pyramid by doing it, by experiencing it directly, or by explaining it and showing it. So the question is, where on this learning pyramid, if you think about that one event that I wanted you to focus on, would you position that learning kick of your life? And then I'm waiting for Annette to come back with the poll results.
We're almost to 100%. I'm just going to leave it open for a couple more seconds and then we'll share the results.
Ooh, this is cool. This works really well.
We're getting good participation on these questions.
Yes, and if I would be in the in a normal room, I would be doing a Mexican wave right now. So imagine me doing a Mexican wave for your participation.
Okay, so in the upper part of the pyramid, we had 7%. In the middle part of the pyramid, we had 19%. And in the lower part of the pyramid, we had 74%.
And there's a sigh of relief from my side, because it's always a risk to do such a poll, just to prove I am right. It's not me who is right, but just if we would have inversed these findings, for example, if we would have a big head on this pyramid and have a lot of percentages there, then I would be in trouble, because I would be speaking against my theory of social architecture. So what we are seeing here is that when we talk about your learning kick, is that most of us, and I'm generalizing it, most of us learn life-changing events or have a learning kick out of the lower part of this pyramid. We're going to translate this a little bit further, and we're going to apply some anthropology on this pyramid. And in order to apply some anthropology on this pyramid, all of a sudden I want you to look at this as a iceberg. An iceberg has only the top part surfacing above the water, and the lower part, which is the biggest chunk, is underwater. This is the metaphor that John Seely Brown is using when he refers to learning and in order to refer to knowledge as an iceberg. And what he says is that the upper part reflects anything that we can transfer in an explicit form. That's the explicit part of knowledge: reading, hearing, seeing. And from the moment that you dive below the water surface and you go into the lower part of the iceberg, the biggest chunk of the iceberg, that's when knowledge becomes tacit. Look at the words: explaining, showing, doing, experiencing. That's tacit knowledge. Now, the way he has gotten to prove that through his research, John Seeley Brown, and his name is written down on the photocopier machine. And his research is from 1995. He was a researcher at the Palo Alto Research Center of Xerox, where he studied on an anthropological level the technicians who repaired the photocopiers. And what he noticed is that whenever they did an intervention, a technical intervention to repair a photocopier, that there were some rituals, because he looked at rituals as an anthropologist, and he describes it as the tribe of technicians gathers around the photocopier, they look at it, and then all of a sudden they change similar experiences they had in the past. The next thing they do is they physically get away from the photocopier and they go around the water cooler. And there they share some more war stories of similar things that had occurred in the past. So what they are doing is they are digging into their common shared knowledge about war stories that had happened to that. Then the next thing they do is they get on the phone and they call some other technicians that can confirm their findings and that confirm their statements. Then they get back to it and they repair it. The funny thing is that when you look at the left-hand side of that painting, is that the explicit knowledge, the books on the shelf, were extremely well documented, and for most of the time they contained already the answer to the technical defect that was going on. The only thing that we see that humans do not behave in that way, and that's when he concludes that knowledge resides in interaction. And so whenever we talk about knowledge, whenever we talk about learning, it's in the lower part of the pyramid. What you see there on the bookshelf is the upper part of that pyramid, and that is what we are confirming also when we answer to our poll, is that if we were working in that company, what the poll is confirming is that only 7% of this population would be reaching out for those books, and the other 19 plus 74% of our population here participating in this poll would be just like those people around that photocopier, sharing war stories and doing the human thing that humans do. And that is normal, because if we think about it, the way that the left part of this painting is constructed is according to a logic that is 120 years old. The conversation that is going on around that photocopier, it might as well have been a fire burning there, because that technology that is going on in that conversation, that is 200,000 years old. As long as there have been humans on the planet, there have been tribes. So our tribal nature is appearing there again. And so we should not neglect it because of something that occurred about 120 years ago. Mind you, I am not saying do away with the explicit knowledge. I am not saying do away with hierarchy. What I'm doing with, what I'm saying with social architecture is that we should balance both out. And I'm getting there just in a second. But before we get to social architecture, there is one more poll question we are going to pop up. I'm just going to describe what's in front of us here, and then we will show the poll question on your screen. Begging the question is the title of this slide, and this is a normal organization chart, and I often ask groups of people to look at it very closely and imagine as if it is their organization. And then I'm going to ask a very logical question, and the poll can begin now. The poll question is: which position on this organization chart is the most important in order for an organization to achieve results? The first option is it is the CEO, and there is some logic to that. It is middle management, and there's also some logic to that. Or it is the ground level staff, and there's also some logic to that. Or you can say it beats me, I absolutely honestly have no idea.
Gonna close the poll in just a few more seconds.
Okay, I'm curious.
All right, we're just about at 100%, so I'm going to close the poll and share the results.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you for everybody for responding so quickly.
So for CEO, we have 12%, middle management, 24%, ground level staff wins at 59%, and then beats me, I have no idea, comes in last at 4%.
That's 4%. Okay. The thing is, and you're going to hate me for this, it was a trick question uh, because I should not have been asking this question from a logical point of view. When I apply logic, when I apply reason, I ask these kind of questions. I ask for what is the most important position on this organization chart. This is the wrong question to ask. I have been tricking you. But the thing is, we do that with our customers as well as organizational change practitioners. We drive people into this logic. The question I should have been asking instead is just not which position is most important to achieve results, is how does this company achieve results? And then we would find out that it is not the boxes, it is not the lines, it is the white space in between the boxes and the lines that really makes a difference. Because what we are finding more and more when I talk about this tribal nature is that the compliance on the left hand side, which is brought about the boxes and the lines, by the boxes and the lines of this organization chart, it's good. It brings us compliance, it brings us order, it brings us hierarchy, it tells us what to do. But in order for this organization not to stagnate, but to move forward and to evolve and to achieve results and to deliver something, what we are really talking about is the white space between all those boxes. And that is based on the dynamics of influence. Remember those two things I have been writing imaginatively on the whiteboard? Those two words, authority and influence. Well, the left-hand side is the dynamic of authority. The right-hand side community is the dynamic of influence playing. The left-hand side is 120 years old. The right-hand side is a technology of 200,000 years old. And that's something we should be able to bring into a balance. Now, I have been talking already for almost more than half an hour, and some of you may be getting impatient and saying, when the hell is he going to explain social architecture? Wait no longer, here it is. This is social architecture. It is the balancing out of those two dynamics. What I'm talking about is on the red structure, we see hierarchy, social fabric of compliance, which is based on the dynamic of authority. And on top of that, layered on top of that, like you would be layering a cake with chocolate or whatever other topping, is community, the social fabric of co-creation. And the dynamic playing there in community is the dynamic of influence. And intuitively, we know that already. We see how our organization works. We see that people are joining projects, task groups, events, tribes, communities, clubs, and so on, and we see them achieving results. The tricky part is when they are dysfunctional, we see that they are on an island. Dysfunction in this organization or in a social architecture means either isolating into compliance and then nothing moves and everybody is angry with you, either isolating into community or a tribe. And then no results are achieved as well because everybody thinks you're too eccentric and nobody wants to be part of your project or your team. The real leadership challenge for the 21st century or for this decade or for this year, I would almost say, is to balance out the dynamic of communities and tribes and that known structure of an organization chart. Now, this may sound a little bit over the edge, but there is some very concrete stuff happening in that area. And when I speak, I will be just talking about a few examples in a moment in my area of work, which is the ERP implementations. There will be one example coming up of very concrete social architecture. So that's me talking, leaving you about half an hour in the dark about social architecture. This is it. This is the picture to remember. This is what it's all about. It's a balancing out of community and hierarchy. Now, let's talk a little bit about the consequences. And before we do so, let's talk about some heroes who have discovered this before I even was born. And the first hero I would like to talk about is Elizabeth Cohen. And Elizabeth Cohen, for those who are in more classroom development and organizational development of education, they already gotten across that name. She was the founder of something that is called designing group work, and one of her main um, actions was to introduce roles into standard classrooms who are performing very bad. Now let's look at the classroom from a social architecture perspective. There is on the one hand side the more compliance part of a classroom. People need to, there is an input of people, they need to cram something into their heads, and the output is smarter people. Very, very simplified and not very good view of what education is supposed to be, but I'm simplifying here just for the sake of getting a point across. So that's the compliance part. What she discovered, Elizabeth Cohen, is that there is also a community part she should be working on, and that is people taking, or children taking, the learning responsibility into their own hands. Now, let's move forward. That book was written in the 60s somewhere, and it has been republished somewhere in the 90s. But let's move forward until the year 2006, when I met Mrs. Saskia, who was a teacher here in the local school in the town of Grimbergen. I will not ask you to pronounce that; it's a Dutch pronunciation. She tried to apply that methodology into her classroom of fourth graders, and what she did is she handed out on a weekly basis roles. You are the timekeepers. You're the timekeeper. You are the materials master. You're the person helping me out on this and this project. And everybody had a responsibility next to just the compliance of them learning something. What she found out is that at the end of the year, their results, first of all, on an intellectual level were better. And secondly, that these children reported, and their parents reported, that their children had learned to really collaborate. Now here is the astonishing part of that observation. Miss Saskia only continued with that theory and with that method of working in her classroom for 2 years. After that, and that is really sad, and that is something for us organizational change practitioners to learn from. After that, she simply stopped because she's gotten tired of all the other teachers and the institutions and other people asking her about why she is doing that, why she is not just teaching like everybody else, why she is always standing out like this. So it takes a little bit of courage to start social architecture within a classroom. And this is something, this is an example for us to remember. So this is just a side remark of somebody in the background of education who has already started social architecture. Now let's move on a little bit on what are the steps to take on raising the bar for our profession. When I'm on the shop floor of a production plant, for example, and I have to talk to the local sponsor of my project who has to roll out in the next year an ERP project. What I do with the plant manager of that plant is, first of all, I start using my expertise, something that I'm acquainted to, that is the lowest level of entry, and I should be keeping that as a bottom line. But the second thing I should be doing before I even can start to talk about social architecture is dive into relationship management, and that really means creating a level of trust with all those people who will be going to involved in my project in the future. So identify them first, and then secondly, build a relationship. Now, relationship management, a lot has been said about it, but my simple definition is being there even when there are no meetings scheduled, and walking around and relating with people even when there is no purpose. And that is when a relationship of trust is built. And then, and only then, you can start raising the bar to social architecture. And social architecture is nothing else than recognizing and making explicit those layers that you're putting on top of that hierarchy, because every project that you are starting puts actually a layer of roles and responsibilities on top of that position-based organization chart. And what you are doing is you are declaring that layer on top of that organization. And by doing so, you are granting the people the permission to start playing those roles. I will come to an example in a minute, but first there's another story to share with you. And this is the story of Major Jim Gant. I learned through it while I was reading the blog of Tom Peters, and he repeatedly referred to this example. This is Major Jim Gant engaged in tactical tribal engagement during the in Afghanistan in the war against the Taliban. There are some remarkable quotes in an ebook that he made, and that's something also a document you should really Google in order to find out more about the tribal nature of our work. And the book is called One Tribe at a Time. It is written at the bottom of that small painting. The quote that I find most interesting is this one. It says, "There is nothing, and I emphasize nothing, that can prove yourself and your team to the tribe more than fighting alongside them. That is the ultimate testament of your team as warriors and your commitment to the tribe. It will create a foundation for influence without authority." See there, the two words, influence and authority, appearing again. And that is the key to success in tribal engagement. And the one quote that lingers on throughout this document is that he encourages us to work with tribes and not against them. Now, the major thing for us to learn from this document, which is Afghanistan-based and which tells a lot about the US Army and their structures, what we can learn from it as organizational change practitioners is that one quote: we should work with the tribes that we see, and the tribal nature that we see, not against it. We should not be the ones forcing in compliance when what we see in front of us is a technology which is 200,000 years older. We should rather balance out the compliance and the technology of 200 years older, which is the community technology. This is what I do when I try to put this this learning from Major Jim Gant into practice. Is I say, let users help. And that's me from the back, and I have this switch on my back, and it says presence on. What I mean with that is, you see me explaining that all of a sudden people will need to start to adopt different business processes, and I have my certain consultant lingo to talk to them, and I can only reach them when I am there. My wife and I have a saying, when I come home from a busy day and I am not completely there present, is you're here but you're not here, honey. That's when I know I need to switch off work and be home when I am home. So presence means being there when you are there, not being in your smartphone or not being in another conversation, really being fully present. And that is the main entry point. And then and only then you can switch over to the switchboard of those people there, of your major stakeholders, people who will be influenced by your projects. And they will grant you the permission to connect to their Wi-Fi on exactly those levels that I've been talking about: expertise, relationship, and social architecture. And that is how very visually I see my work as an organizational change consultant, which is not learning people something or pushing something down their throats, but rather enabling their capacity. Let's dive a little bit deeper into that, because here is the example that I would like to talk about, social architecture. What we identified in a multinational company for warehouse management software is that across the globe there were different implementations of the same software in Germany, Italy, and France, and we identified business representatives who did exactly the same role and had exactly the same access to a system as their counterparts in other countries. What we did do then is created a social layer by giving those people, first of all, the permission to connect on a human level with their counterpart in a different country. And how do we grant that permission? by declaring first of all that they are wearing a badge, and that badge is from now on you have the role of a warehouse manager for this project. And based on the justification of that badge and the permission that was granted by us, then and only then they started to connect on a human level, and helping them out tremendously on all the practical stuff, but also on how to think about their warehouse and running their warehouse more efficiently. This is just one small example of what you're capable of doing in an ERP project, and this is all uncharted territory. You will find it in zero textbooks on change management, but still this is how we can really achieve added value with a client, and this is really to my opinion something capacity that we can enable for our clients. Now when I used the quotes in the previous slide, let users help, I should say that I've gotten my inspiration from someone else, and that someone else is the Boston-based ePatient Dave. When you Google ePatient Dave, you will come across a TEDx TED, that's TEDx video of him explaining his journey in having cancer and his journey in trying to get a hold of his own medical records and taking the responsibility of his own healing into his own hands. This was my source of inspiration to start saying, okay, let's enable that community, because the most underutilized resource in healthcare, for example, is the patient. My slogan has become since then the most underutilized resource in an organizational change project is the user, or the persons that are being influenced. Now, when I talk about the pains of social architecture, and this is where I'm starting to conclude my presentation, is what does this mean exactly for us as practitioners? When we look at this famous quote, I skate where the puck is going to be, not where it has been, what this means for me in my personal portfolio as a change practitioner, I have a portfolio which is composed out of 4 components: communication, learning, organization, and performance. For those who are interested in that, they can dive into my blog and look at the video at me explaining that. But that's not the point. I don't want to talk about the contents of my own personal toolbox. What this means is I have to critically examine the toolbox that I am presenting towards my clients and see, well, I should upgrade. If I'm honest about this social architecture thing, I should be upgrading my toolbox as well. And very visually, what I'm showing here is how this skating where the puck is going to be. Left hand side is where it has been over the past 30 years with traditional change management. And you can see clearly the domains of communication, learning, organization, and performance, and what is inside there, and how exactly I need to upgrade it in order to be functioning well with a social architecture. So this is, if at all, I would be having a request towards you as a community at the end of this presentation, then it would be look critically to your own toolbox as a change practitioner and dive into it and be honest with yourself. If I am going to adapt, and if I'm really convinced that social architecture is the new balance we need to reach, then what is my role going to be? Is it still the role of a problem solver, or should I not rather think of myself as a capacity builder? And if that answer is yes to that question, if you say to yourself, damn, I should no longer be a problem solver, I should think of myself as a capacity builder, then you also should have the courage to do what I did with my toolbox and to upgrade it and to take different actions on a different level. This is really my invitation to you. And as I said, this is uncharted territory. And that's what I want to end with, this quote of Ernest Shackleton when he recruited people on the South Pole journeys. He advertised for it as men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful. And then lastly, honor and recognition in case of success. Now this is my invitation towards you. If you agree that social architecture is a reality we are heading for, then we should have the courage to upgrade and to participate and see what this uncharted territory brings. This is where my presentation ends. I will be still online because I think we have some 10 minutes to spend together. I am interested to see if there are any questions being asked. I'm handing over the word again to Annette.
Hi there, Luke. Thank you so much. It's a very informative webinar. We do have some questions from the audience. And the first is social architecture the same as a matrix organization?
Well, that's a good question. Is social architecture the same as a matrix organization? I've had yesterday a conversation about that for about an hour. Short answer is I don't know. The longer answer is it functions in that same way. The only difference with a matrix organization is that you are building up attention from positions against positions. What I am referring to is slightly different. I am referring to also a matrix or a lattice organization which is built up from positions, which is the hierarchy, versus roles. And the difference there, just to give one example, is positions are rewarded, roles are recognized. So there is two different dynamics. In a classic matrix organization, we would play out authority versus authority. I am saying that we should be balancing out authority versus influence. So yes, it looks the same, and no, it is different. That's my answer.
Thanks, Luke. Our next question is, how do you influence the C-suite to embrace this concept? It could be perceived as very risky, giving up too much control.
Yeah. Well, yes to that, and that is why how do we convince them is in the same way that we could convince runners to start running barefoot and to discover barefoot running again. Okay, why all of a sudden I'm talking about barefoot running? There are a lot of there's a lot of scientific evidence that barefoot running is way lot healthier than running with running shoes with sneakers on. But there is a whole industry that is based on thinking that we are protecting our feet with running shoes on. Now, simply coming into a boardroom and saying, take off our shoes, let's go running barefoot, they would look at me as crazy. What smart companies are doing, they are producing fancy shoes, which are minimal shoes, and which say, okay, this will help you to run safely in barefoot. So what we are seeing there and observing there is that people need kind of an excuse, something tangible, something they can buy, something they can use as a methodology, something safe for them to hang on to, like a barefoot running shoe, which are those 5-finger shoes and what have you. People need that in order to transition into a new reality that is not theirs. And what I'm eager to find out is what this would look like for social architecture. I know one thing is for certain, a diagnostic would be part of that, and that I am developing together with some other people, and I am talking to researchers to make it more professional, and some other diagnostic tools in order to, first of all, have a position. But secondly, we will be talking in the future about a tool set, because we intuitively know already that this has to be reality, but the C-suite really needs us to implement tools and to use something structured, like a barefoot running shoe.
Thank you, Luke. Do we have any other questions from the audience? If we do, please type them into the question pane and I will ask them of Luke.
Okay.
Okay, we got one more here. In an environment where trust is low, can you provide some guidance to an individual that wants to improve the environment?
One thing that comes to mind when I hear that question is a quote of an author I really admire, and that is Peter Block, and he says, "Trust is low when there is silence, secrecy, and justification." And I think that is something all of us have already witnessed in practice. sometimes it is abundant. The thing about silence, secrecy, and justification is, if we have a lot of courage and a lot of energy, we can be the first to break that spell. But it takes a lot of courage and a lot of energy, and it's a little bit of choice theory and tit for tat tactics. If you are positive in a response, and you're positive in the next response, and positive in the next response, but people keep on making use of justification, silence, and secrecy, you're running out of energy really quickly. And then there is no good answer to that. But I know that we hold the keys as an individual, even in an individual not in a high position, to be the first to get out of that spell. If, as a next step, the response is negative, we may have to make other choices, but that's a different story then.
Thank you, Luc. Our next question is, from your initial data slide, trust is clearly evident as a foundational requirement for any organization. How important will it be for change practitioners to prioritize it as an area of focus in order to create an organizational environment that will provide the ability for social architecture to succeed?
Yeah, and that's a thing, that's a challenge, huh? You know, talking about trust as an organizational change practitioner, I have never seen trust as a product in a in a proposal for a customer. It's something very intangible. And how do you explain the business value of trust? Of how do you go about talking really about trust? Now, I do not possess the answer yet for my world, but throughout some conversations that I had with ePatient Dave, so Dave the Bronker that I mentioned already in the case of Let Patients Help, is what he suggests is that we prepare, in his context, we prepare hospitals for the fact that patients should be participating as um, um, correcting, like text correcting, like for instance, the doctor could be writing a text about the condition of the patient, and the patient could be viewing and correcting alongside. So what he says is, let patients help. He's not saying doctors are fallible. And that is one thing we should really get into the minds of executives, is that we adopt that point of view, is that we are not saying your organization is fallible, but users can help. We create a certain type of vulnerability on the one hand, but on the other hand, we can start talking about, and that's when I'm getting back to the beginning of my answer, we can talk about the quality of the text. And that is a conversation we can have with about the value of social architecture. Talking about trust, it will not really be very beneficial in a business conversation, but talking about using trust as a tool to increase the quality of the final product through increased participation of users, increased participations of patients as a co-reader into their medical documents. Now, that's how we improve the quality of healthcare, and that's how we, in our business processes, can improve the quality of our business processes. So when we hold the conversation about quality and use that argument in order to convince people to loosen up a little bit on controls and to increase the trust, that is something worth exploring.
Luc, thank you so much again for presenting today. That is the end of our list of questions. And at this time, I'll turn it back over to Lynn Wheeling for our closing. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Luc. That was a very informative presentation, and I'm going to say I enjoyed all of the graphics in your presentation slides.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Just as general housekeeping for everyone that's attending today, the recording of this presentation will be posted to the ACMP Members Resource Library, which is located right on the ACMP Global website. You can download and listen to this again at your leisure. We want to remind you that we have 2 more member-only webinars before our Change Conference 2014 in Orlando. So please check back often to the ACMP website. And thank you very much for your contributions to membership and participation with ACMP. Thank you again, Luke Gallopin. Everyone have a great day.